No intro, straight into the video. First things first, this tier list is relative, meaning that a D tier is not a D tier guide in general compared to everyone else in the community, otherwise we'd all know where most of my guides would be going. This tier list was inspired by infamous animator Meat Canyon after he did a tier list on his own animations where he did something similar. A D tier Meat Canyon animation is still some of the best you can find on YouTube, and I'd say that for myself, a quote unquote D tier guide is roughly equivalent to an A tier or an S tier guide you could find by another creator. Also note that around half these guides, particularly the supports and tanks, were updated in my recent 8-hour guides. Without further ado, let's get to ranking. So first off, in D tier, we have my Ashe guide. Now when I was making my Ashe guide, I was having summer exams back in early June, meaning that I basically rushed this video in 4 days. For those with a keen eye, like Just Recently, who's one of Spilo's mods, they recognized that there was some deja vu from my other guides. I basically replied saying that yeah, it was rushed, but I also make a comment at the end basically saying that even though I rushed this guide out, you'd still be hard pressed to find something better, being a short little implication on the state of educational Overwatch. Lastly, I'll be putting Echo at the end of D tier. The main reason for this is the lack of simplicity towards the end. Even Spilo critiqued me for overcomplicating concepts.
There's too many arrows. There's too many arrows and too many words on my screen right now. I have no idea what's going on. It needs to be easier to understand. Like, that's the reason why clickbaity stuff like works, because it's just very like simple, basic, whatever, catchy. And for you as an educational content creator / entertaining content creator, you need to lean more towards simplicity, because with this kind of stuff, not only are you failing to educate people because they don't understand as much of what you're saying, because it's too much or it's not explained simply enough, you're boring people. You're not boring me. I understand it. I find it interesting, but you're boring other people. Content is beefed. Delivery is weak.
Moving on to C tier, and I'm going to start being a bit quicker with Honor. In essence, even with the updated version, the essay version of the guide actually got a high tolerable by Spilo, and I don't think anything particularly stands out about the guide compared to other ones that I've made. Next up is Reinhardt. I definitely made the guide a lot better in my complete 8-hour guide, but Reinhardt is just such a holistic, team-dependent character that requires so much game knowledge that I don't think you can distill the hero well enough in a 15-minute video. Following Reinhardt is Wrecking Ball, who is placed here for a similar reason to Reinhardt, just a bit more tech-oriented, which makes it slightly easier to make a guide around him. Moving into 5th from bottom, we have Mercy. I think maybe I should have emphasized more on the importance of maximizing your micro, as well as including some of Niandra, who's a fantastic YouTuber for Mercy players. Next up is Moira. Honestly, this guide would be higher up if the actual production quality wasn't so bad. It was the first guide I ever made, but the mic and video quality just isn't up to scratch. I would have also liked to included a bit more on Moira in Talent Dive and in Brawl, alongside the value of Coalescence. The last hero in C tier that I'll be placing is Sombra. I think I do a good job in terms of emphasizing Sombra's range in the updated guide, but perhaps more on Sombra in Dive or Poke Dive could be added as well. Her alternative playstyles depending on comp are also really important, as ioStux details in the analysis of his Talent Dive matchup against Poke Dive. Starting off in B tier is Roadhog. This guide got beefed by Spilo, and I updated it with the feedback he gave, and overall, I felt pretty pleased with it. The only thing I'd maybe say is that Hog is such a one-dimensional hero that it's hard to do macro content on him, and I wish I spent more time hammering on Hog's contribution to map control through his dueling ability, whilst also emphasizing the importance of landing hooks. If you don't land hooks on Hog, you're practically throwing. Next up is Doomfist. This is actually my best video across my entire channel, and I think I do a decent job of wrapping around the fundamental micro and macro of the hero. The only issue is, likewise to Wrecking Ball, Doomfist is a pretty tech heavy hero and is also in a somewhat weak state, so the ability to jam in more macro information is limited. After Doomfist is Zarya. After my update, I'm glad I emphasized the importance of high ground with Zarya, since so many Zaryas, even in the highest ranks, just sit behind their Reinhardt and get shot by a million different directions, hence why D.Va is a more popular pick. The additional elaboration on Zarya's bubbles also helps. With that being said, maybe some more added nuance from top 500 Zaryas, like A10, could have been used. Following Zarya is Symmetra, who's kind of in the same boat. Maybe some small additional elaboration on more dynamic teleports and Brawl, but nothing much more than that. Next up is Lucio, same kind of ordeal. Maybe I could have used some advice in this video here, and the production quality is lacking at times, likewise to my Moira guide, since it's one of my earlier made guides from last year. But I am happy that I had emphasis on the importance of high ground and your contribution to map control as Lucio. After Lucio is Winston. I'm actually really pleased with how the Primal Rage section turned out, alongside the 4 key pillars of when to go for backline. The main key thing is perhaps the shift in meta and the impact that has on the video. Back then, Winston with Poke was really popular, meaning Winston spent a lot of time frontlining, farming nano boost, but due to the Echo Tracer ball comp, that's really no longer viable. Even back then, in ranked, you'd be hard pressed to find an opportunity where you wouldn't want to get an angle onto the enemy backline. After Winston is Brig. I had to do a lot of reworking in the updated guide since over armor got removed, alongside the massive number changes to Brig, and even then, I don't think the guide is perfect. Perhaps some clips from StormCrowProductions' Brig analysis could have edged this guide into the certified hood classics. Next up is Orisa. I'm glad I nailed the shield timing bit in the video, since people tend to look down on Orisa, but thankfully, there was good depth to the hero. Maybe a little bit of pro analysis or synergy with Reinhardt and Wrecking Ball could have edged this guide into the hood classics as well. The penultimate hero in this tier is Zenyatta, definitely one of the best updated guides that I've made via the much more heavy emphasis on Zenorbs. The production quality is a bit lacking though, and maybe a tad bit more analysis with the poke dive comp. Lastly in this tier, we have Tracer. I'm really pleased with how the macro ended up. I just wish I spent a bit more time hammering in on the Tracer micro, such as terrain usage and blink management, as yet again, StormCrowProductions goes through on the channel. Starting off in the A tier, we have Pharah. Similar case with Tracer, really pleased with nailing down the playstyles of Pharah, and maybe just a tad bit more on the micro. Next up is D.Va, probably one of my best aged guys out there. I'd probably add a bit more for my VOD with Spilo in the guide, alongside a bit more Brawl specific stuff that Natter touches on in his Brawl videos. After D.Va is Genji. Unironically, I'm glad I used bits of Spilo breaking down some of Super Genji, alongside the macro additions of Genji poking out high grounds, as well as the two main playstyles clearly set out by ioStux. In short, a really good balance of micro and macro. Following Genji is the last support hero in the rest of the tier list, which is Baptiste. Bap is really quite a simple hero, so I'm glad I nailed down the fundamentals. With that being said, maybe a few touch-ups on micro here or there, such as ammo management before fights, and this guide would be higher up. After Baptiste is Torb. Probably the best Torb guide you can find, since there's just not much Torb content out there. Fury500 himself approved of the video, meaning that you know that this guide is an instant hit classic from the get-go. Junkrat follows Torb, with a similar case with Pharah in terms of playstyles, since most people think of Junkrat as a choke spammer only, when that will only get you so far. Likewise to Torb, I don't think that there's a better Junkrat guide out there, mainly because there's just not much content on Junkrat. Yet another projectile DPS follows the previous two, being Hanzo. Despite having a 30-second sponsor at the start of the video still did really well, and I still packed in a ton of detail. Moving on from Hanzo is Soldier. Really happy with how this guy turned out, with the emphasis on Soldier sprint in combination with his consistent range and higher self-sufficiency when compared to Cassidy. Also, some micro from Jayne a few years ago adds the cherry on the cake. Now onto the last three guides in this category. First up is Sigma, who I added in quite a lot of detail after my initial guide, specifically on the more fundamental side, because even to this day, I still see master level Sigmas stacked behind their Iron Shield. Perhaps a little more detail on accretion being a failsafe for Sigma, likewise to McCree's flashbang, alongside some detail from Natter's double shield video, and this would honestly be a perfect guide. With that being said, I'm still really happy that I brought to light the res Sigma tech that Octotrough uncovered. Next up is Mei. The main reason for this being so high up is the acronym TLVCS, which, even to this day when analysing ice walls at GM levels, still comes to use. Perhaps some more emphasis on counter-walling in Brawl mirrors, and some more unorthodox Mei positioning could edge this guide into S tier. Last up is Widowmaker. Most people view Widowmaker as an all-aim no-brain hero, which I'm glad I debunked in the video, alongside the additions I made with Spilo's hammer time on the video. Now onto the S tier, guides which cover everything, if not more, alongside uncovering playstyles and information, which is really super valuable, but is really underspoken in the community. First up is Cassidy. Even when Spilo hammer timed this, I don't think he added anything much in his review. The hard and soft flank nuances are really important, and it's stuff that only GM level players are able to master. The only thing that Spilo really left was the critique at the end, saying that I shouldn't have included the stuff about Cassidy in hybrid comps, but honestly, I still think it holds good value, and it's much better explained than what I did with my Echo guides. In second place is, surprisingly for some of you, the Bastion guide. The thing which I'm really pleased with throughout the video is Bastion's contribution to map control, which is something Bastion really struggles at since he's immobile, but his ultimate being used to just basically cheat any duel in the game because he can one-shot squishies is probably the most broken thing in the entire game that's not talked about at all. People just see his ultimate as completely useless because they use it down main and end up doing less than if they were just in sentry mode. The playstyles I include are also well explained and covered, and the only addition I'd make is just some emphasis on the Bastion Symmetra strats for some teams. For instance, I developed this Lijiang Tower strat for my High Master to Low Grandmaster team, and it worked really well, even up against top teams, with the only times it failing being because we just messed up the micro, such as getting booped off on Coast for example. If I included that in the video, this guide would be the best I have ever made. But ultimately, that title goes to my Reaper guide. Really pleased with the macro section of the guide, which is basically half the video. Even at top levels, Reapers don't look to half flank, which can be really costly. But yeah, nothing I've watched or learnt about Overwatch since my Reaper guide is really something I'd want to go back and include in the video, making this guide really top notch, for me personally at least. Well, that's the video. If you yourself have watched a handful of guides, let me know what you think is the best guide that I've made, and the link to all my guides will be in the description down below. Until next time.
And I say, hey, living